But can it run Crysis? That question, believe it or not, to this day still is relevant and just as funny. The impact that this one game has had on the whole industry, and even beyond that, is bigger than even I thought. So, why Crysis was, and still is, important. Today's 14th August 2020. To celebrate the end of the world as well as the Crysis soon-to-be-released remaster, let's examine what we learned and still can learn from this 13-year-old game. It's 2007 and Yemix is sitting at his very crappy garbage PC with less than 10 megs of video memory, salivating at the release of Crysis. This incredibly looking futuristic game with invisibility, supersuit, customizing weapons and running around in seemingly open world entices the viewer. The more I looked at it, the more incredible it felt, and about a year later, after picking up my first graphics card, the GeForce 7600 GS, Jesus Christ. And I'm not kidding, yes, that was my first graphics card, and boy, was it I was able to play Crysis with it, and god damn it looked amazing. But was graphics alone what made it great? Back in the day, I still remember watching some old tech reviews where they tried to up the quality to see how many frames would they get. Even the pinnacle 2 years later, the Radeon HD 5970, a dual GPU, did not max out on 60 frames a second. The game had such incredible hardware demands and was backed by the sheer beauty, from which the phrase, "Can it run Crysis?" spawned. Everyone toasted their PCs trying to run this beast of a game, but that was not the only thing that made it so great. I mean, any random Johnny can put millions of stupid if statements in the code and that will stress the system. For Crysis, the requirements came because of actual features, advancements, and new tech. As a wannabe computer tech, I was looking at Crysis, Half-Life 2, Doom 3 and more to be kind of games where every little bit is squeezed out of modern hardware and more, where coders and artists had keyed in their collaborative strengths to utmost perfection, creating something that would drive the PC and overall computing technology to new heights. Even as a kid, I saw what Crysis would do for the next generation of games. It quite literally set the bar. Well, at least graphics-wise. But, as a fun side note, what were the other cool things about Crysis? By using incredible amounts of coding and different techniques, shading as well as texture quality, even to this day, Crysis makes a lot of games pale in comparison, which is both cool and kinda sad when you think about it. The fact that you can go back and look at this good old DirectX 10 game, and it looked better than majority of DirectX 11 or 12 games is astounding. On the first glance, you can tell artists had put a lot of effort and utilized appropriate lifelike textures, and only if you look close enough, you notice the polygonal nature of nature. For me, so many games fail to represent any kind of foliage in a realistic way, that now, looking back at this, just makes me question, what are the other devs doing wrong? Frankly, the only engine and developer that surpasses this quality in my mind is really just one, and that's DICE, with their phenomenally looking Frostbite engine, and what they did in several of their games thanks to photogrammetry, and a few other tricks that scream effort, much like Crysis 1. But okay, let's say shrubs don't impress you. Well, shadows, you see, are a big part of what makes things look good. And indeed, Crysis used two methods of lighting, where games before it did not bother with sometimes either one. And of course, these days we predominantly use shadow mapping, but regardless, it was an interesting tech combination. In fact, for this mini video essay, I looked up some old GDC and other presentations of how these guys made Crysis, and I'm swamped, honestly. As a coder, I still think that shaders are black magic that does not make any sense to me, so I'll have to admit that I lack the knowledge to explain it all properly, if you will. Still, let's not drag this out, so check it out if you want for yourselves. Let's move on. But speaking of shadows, did you know that Crytek guys literally invented screen, space, ambient occlusion, a technique that visually gives objects and the world a little bit more depth. And as a wannabe dev, I find this fascinating and quite daunting, so forgive me if I don't describe everything in the greatest detail, as I haven't really coded in a while, so moving on. Regardless, on the gameplay side, it's interesting to note that Crysis is one of the rather rare cases of semi-open FPS games for the time. Aside from Far Cry, Deus Ex or Thief games, there really were not that many such FPS games, especially in late 2000s. Well, okay, Stalker was actually a better open world type of a game, but graphically nowhere near. Also, it's interesting to note that destructible environments were also a big thing that these days we talk less about, but back in 2007, even years after, there were almost no games with such feature. Even the famous Red Faction Gorilla would not come out till 2009, so in FPS category, for sure, this was a big thing. I could really harp on how this game presented so many world firsts or utilized features to a new never seen level, but already you can see how that could have been enough to cement this game as the bar. In fact, the whole slogan, "But can you run Crysis?" has been given a new life with the new explosive Ryzen CPUs from AMD, especially the Threadripper chips. Those could run the game. No, I mean the chip alone, the CPU rendering only. So what impact did Crysis leave? With this astounding benchmark, pun intended, this put a fire under Valve with their Source engine, Epic with their upcoming Unreal 3 engine, and of course, let's not forget the id with their idTech engines that never really caught on at the time. Yeah. Anyways, I have a feeling that these guys at least took a few notes. And with Unreal 3, you could feel a little bit of that competitive spirit. These days though, if you think of an engine that looks really good, Unreal probably is the first you think of. All these giants had a lot to compete when seemingly out of nowhere Crysis drops and takes the PC gamers by a storm. On top of that, the monstrous hardware requirements meant that whoever were to capture this elusive "I can run Crysis at full max" title would rule the PC space on hardware end as well. And at the time, it was pretty much the end of Radeon Graphics' heyday. As far as I can remember, it was because of their stupidly insane HD 5970 that they kept the title for a little while. But for one reason or another, Nvidia soon overtook it and put out some amazing hardware. So not only in-game visuals we got to say thanks to Crysis, but also driving forward the hardware too. The gaming market was shouting more than ever that they need better hardware, and of course, ATI and Nvidia was ready to fight it out. Of course, with the advance of different tech, as well as rendering, physics and other attributes go hand in hand. But even back in 2007, I could feel what Crysis would bring in for the general gaming, and what era would start. The era of empty, shallow, graphics-pumping trends. The games that followed after Crysis dropped were quite mediocre visually, while trying to look as good as possible by starting to cram onto your camera post-processing effects, color grading and all sorts of things and whatnot. I found it very typical of console-oriented games to do it, which also became a trend at that time, where more typical PC games were designed with consoles in mind, or predominantly to appeal to console market first. The horrible flashbacks of 2009 Wolfenstein come to mind. Ew. And yes, I know the PC Master Race spirit is strong with me, but come on. And even Crysis itself fell into this trap. With Crysis 2 announcement around 2011, I remember being for the first and the last time truly excited and hyped for video games. Around that time, finally, Duke Nukem Forever would be released, as well as Portal 2. Three amazing sounding things, but as hindsight tells you, only one of them was really good. Crysis 2 took the backseat of pushing the tech as far as it would go and opted to appeal to consoles and work on performance boosting, then quality pushing, implementing for the first time DirectX 11, which looked really good, but now environments shrunk to small corridors and all that nonsense. abandoning the grand bombastic shouting of "Look at me!" World of Crysis 1. And so the king of hardware limits dethroned itself, it seemed, and would never be seen again. Ah, but what about Star Citizen? Well, what about it? That's a travesty, not a game. It's a clown. Oh, wait, it's still in alpha? It's not even a game then either. So, in the end, is Crysis the last of its kind, where a bunch of guys just come together to make something that utterly embarrasses everyone for literal decade to come? Well, I can't answer that, but I can tell you that where there is PC Master Race, there's always someone who has the know-how, will, and time to make something squeal like a pig about to be slaughtered. Of course, anyone can drop a million entities in the game world and watch the CPU and GPU struggle, but to also make it beautiful and quite interesting as a game alongside it, well, now that, my friends, is a challenge. I truly have to say big thank you to Crysis for being this amazing pillar of PC gaming and for inspiring me to not only learn how to make a triangle appear on the screen, but also to think what would be the best way to do so. And by no means, Crysis is a great game in my book. Its story is simple, enemies never change, level design is thwarted by the semi-open world design, but in all that there are diamonds that make this one of the more important pieces of art, entertainment, and technology in my book. So here's to you, Crysis. Today is the day when your first mission took place, and I sure will replay you from time to time. You know, to check if my UPC can run you.
Something is definitely going on inside them.
Get those generators back on now.
I can't stabilize the current. Something's draining power from our equipment.
Do a story. Fix it now.
I'm trying. This whole structure is a power sink.
Okay, folks, do you want to see something weird, something amazing from back in 2009? Well, look at this Earth! Yeah, it's kind of weird. I'm not even sure what is happening. There are clearly two layers to the ground, you know, the surface bump map and the subsurface something. Okay, that's new. Come on! Here we go, here we go, here we go, here we go. Oh, you little bastard. Come here. Come here. There we go. I'll throw it. Come on, Crysis! What the hell is this? Okay, here's a homing frog for you. Give me a moment. Oh gods! Fuck! Friend with the Pepe. Give me a moment. Hold on. Oh no! I wanted to put. Nah. Okay, that's it. You battle. You're the guilty one. Okay. Pepe number 2. Here we go. We got Pepe number 2. What can we do with you? Come on, Pepe. Here we go, some friends. Hey, do you like my Pepe? No! No! Run! Okay, here we go, Pepe number 4. Yes. Is your name Pepe? No, who cares, alright? Okay, Pepe, show me how you fly. Very poorly.